Hello everyone, my name is James. Welcome to King's Fine Woodworking. Today I'm going to show you how I made this little keepsake box. The box is made of wenge and the trays are made of padauk. First, I want to say thank you to everyone for the fantastic year so far. And I want to tell you that our Father's Day sale for 2019 begins right now. We have wood from around the world to make our Thor's Hammer woodworking mallets, and starting now, they are all on sale for half price. We will run out of our precious Lignum Vitae, which is the world's densest wood, and Cocobolo, the most beautiful rosewood of all, because these are no longer being imported. But these two are half price for the sale until I run out. Details of the sale are in the description below. Thank you everyone, and have a happy Father's Day. So the first thing I did was to start with a block of 8/4 wenge. This is the wood that we use oftentimes for our mallet handles, and I had a piece big enough to make this box out of, and that's what we're going to start using. I jointed one side first just to get a nice straight edge, and then I ripped it to approximately the width that I want. Now the walls for my box are a lot thinner than 8/4, so I'm going to start out by resawing them down to about just a little bit over 1/2 inch thick. And then when that's done, I will plane them down to the exact thickness that I want. One thing about wenge, if you decide to ever work with it, is it's very splintery. It's a beautiful wood once it's all done and finished, and it's perfectly safe once it's all done and finished. But if you get a splinter from this wood, it tends to cause an infection. So if you get a splinter, you want to pull it out right away. And use polysporin and a Band-Aid or something like that, and it'll keep the chance of you getting infected way down. Alright, so the next step was to take this over to the planer and get it planed down so that it was perfectly flat and all of the pieces were exactly the same thickness. I wasn't looking for any specific wall thickness, just something thinner than what it was, so I think I planed these down to around 1/2 inch. I've decided I'm going to use miter joints for the corners of the box, and so I have pulled out my miter gauge. I made sure my miter gauge is set exactly at 90. And I put a little sacrificial fence up to it there, and you see I'm sliding my board over till it touches a stop, which I have clamped to the fence of my table saw. This will allow me to get both the front and the back sides of the box cut to the exact same length. And you can probably notice all I need to do is flip the board over, slide that over to my stop, and this will cut the other side of the box. And these two cuts should be exactly the same now. So off camera, I actually assembled the box, just kind of held everything up in place to take a look at it. And I'm not really building this with any specific set of dimensions in mind. I just want the proportions to look nice, and when I put it all together, it looked to me like it was too high. So I marked one side on all of them, and I'm just going to cut it off a little bit, make it a little bit shorter, and I think that will make the box just a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. That's actually how I build a lot of my projects. I just kind of do them by eye, and afterwards sometimes I'll make plans, and the plans are what I put on the website. But most of the projects I just kind of wing it. I build it to what looks good as I go and modify it as I go, and hope it ends up turning out okay. And I think this height of a box is actually going to look a lot better when it's all done. So after putting the box in place in a nice orientation where I thought the grain looked good, I'm taking it back apart, but I'm making sure I'm keeping all of these pieces in the exact order, and I'm going to put all of these together with tape to hold them temporarily until I can get the glue to hold and bond. So another thing with wenge that we need to be concerned about is dust. Wenge dust is one of the only wood species that I know of that the dust is actually toxic. If you inhale large quantities of wenge dust and you do it over an extended period of time, you can end up with some neurological damage. So if you are going to work with wenge, and especially if you're going to sand it, you must wear a respirator. A dust mask would probably work, I suppose, but I would definitely recommend a respirator. Spend a little bit more money and get a respirator. Once the Wenge has been sanded and finished, it's 100% safe. It's just the dust is not very good for you. So that's just a little precaution there for anybody who it might decide to work with it. It's a beautiful wood. Just take some precautions. It's definitely important if you are building a box that has mitered corners and you're going to use this tape method of assembly and light duty clamping, that you take the time to get the corners aligned perfectly. You want the edges to line up. You want them all to be in a single row so that when you fold the box around, it comes out nice and square. I did off camera actually clean the end grain of the Wenge with acetone. Wenge is a slightly oily wood, and if you clean it with acetone, that will take off the oils from the surface and you'll get a very good glue bond. And CA glue also works wonderfully in Wenge. Wenge has just the right porosity for this glue to work fantastic. So that's how we're going to put this thing together today. Of course, if you were smarter than me, you would probably use latex gloves and maybe even avoid getting this CA glue all over your fingers. Once I have it in place where it looks good, I finish taping the final corner, and then I will go ahead and apply some clamps to get just a little bit more clamping pressure than what the tape provides. I think that yields a stronger joint in the end, and that guarantees that all the corners, the miters, close up nicely. Once that's done, I will use a little bit of the CA accelerator that will take and cure the bond instantly, so I don't have to sit and wait for a few minutes for it to bond. Sometimes if I have a lot of glue that's deep inside of a joint, it might take 5 or 10 minutes. Even though it's super glue or instant glue, it's not really instant, but with the application of the accelerator, of course, it does become instant, and we can take the clamps off and take everything apart right away. For small boxes at this stage, I usually take them over to my disc sander. I have a 12-inch disc sander, and I made a little bit bigger one actually for the lathe. I have a video on that. I can put a link in the description below. But the disc sander is nice. It allows you to very quickly get all of the extra glue, the tape, and stuff like that off of the outside of the box, and gets the box nice and square. It's just a quick way to do it. If you don't have a disc sander, that's no problem. You could actually use some spray adhesive and attach sandpaper to a block and just sand it on a block. Next, I'm just going to trace the approximate size of the top and the bottom on this other piece of wood, and then I will go and have those cut on the chop saw. I have made these cuts just a little bit oversized, and I will sand them to flush after I stick them on. So I don't really have to follow this line exactly. This just gives me an idea where I can get really close to. Same situation here. I have cleaned these surfaces with acetone, and then I'm going to liberally apply some CA glue, cyanoacrylate glue, and just bond these in place. So if I apply just a little bit of downward pressure to ensure a tight bond, then I can go ahead and hit this with the accelerator and get an instant cure, and it's good to go. The curing of CA glue is actually a chemical reaction, and the accelerator is really just a catalyst that causes that chemical reaction to happen very fast. So I'm going to do the exact same thing at the top here. And you can see right here, I'm not checking the glue there. I'm actually checking the surface to make sure that my top is sticking out just past the edges all the way around so that I can sand it down. As soon as these have cured, we'll take this right back over to the disc sander, and then we'll sand the top and bottom to be completely flush with the sides. And that looks pretty good right there. I'm sure you can see the copious amounts of dust that are being produced by this, so you can bet that I am definitely wearing my respirator. And that looks pretty good there too. And if you notice, the side I'm getting ready to sand here, there's on the right hand corner on the top, I have a little error that that wood had some damage in it, and when I sanded it right there, and we're going to hide that error right at that corner. In just a few minutes I'll show you how we're going to do that. A lot of times when you have a ding or a dent or some chip out, something in the wood, or just a natural defect, you can hide it by putting a decorative groove around a box or whatever you're building at that point, and that depression will go down below the surface of the damage, as long as you can go that deep safely, and it'll look just natural. It'll look like it's something you intended to do, and it will sort of hide the flaw or the blemish that might have been created. So I actually have to take this pass down, I think about 3 or 4 times here, and get it down about an 1/8 or 3/16 of an inch, somewhere in that range, in order to successfully hide that error. But when it's all done, I think this adds a fairly nice feature to the box. It's a neat little attractive decoration there, and it definitely hides the mistake that was there before. Next, I have the top of the box up, and I've got it clamped into my vise, and I'm going to put a chamfer on it all the way around for decoration. Alright, then it's time to finally cut the lid off of the box, and we can start working on the inside. So for this, I generally will do it at my bandsaw. If you don't have a bandsaw, it's no big deal. You can do it on the table saw. You'll just make 4 passes and rotate your box 90 degrees each time. Once that's done, I do like to take that back over to the disc sander, or you can just use a sheet of paper on your table saw and kind of sand these edges flat. Because the bandsaw it's a little bit rough, it leaves some saw blade marks around there. It'll be the same if you cut on your table saw. So if you sand it flush, then it makes a nice fit finish. Alright, so the step after that here, what I'm doing is putting a little bit of a rabbet on the inside all the way around, and this is how the lid is going to close over the body. If you enjoy watching our videos, we would really appreciate it if you would click that subscribe button down below. And if you happen to click the bell notification icon, then you'll be notified each time we release a new video. And doing that really helps us out a lot, helps us to grow our channel, and something we really love doing, so we really appreciate it if everybody would subscribe. Thank you. So we're cutting this out nice and slow so that I don't get any tear out on the inside. Wenge is just a little bit splintery, so I don't want to cut too fast with this. So this is putting the dado once again for the box lid so that it fits over the box body. And for the box body, it's basically the same tool, except we're going to cut on the outside this time. That way the lid will fit over the top of this cut. So I can see with a little test fit that they'll fit, except I've got to remove these corners. So we're going to chisel these out. I'm going to just use a marking tool and mark them square where I want to chisel to. And I'll make a little pencil mark in there too where that line is so I can see it. It's a little bit tough to see where the scoring marks are in Wenge sometime. And basically I just use a really sharp chisel and I just slowly work my way down through the wood. I start on the outermost point first and just take a tiny little bit at a time with each pass and gradually work my way back to the line. And then we'll just pare this down flat to give us a nice flat inside corner. And we'll do the same on all 4 of those, and that will complete the lid. Alright, so Maya is going to start sanding the lid and getting some of that glue squeeze out away from the inside, and I'm going to start working on the trays. The trays are going to be made of Padauk, and it's going to be a very similar process. I've cut a piece here, and I'm going to resaw it down to something a little bit thinner, since I don't want the trays to be too thick. And we'll need to take it over to the planer, and we'll plane all of the boards down to the same thickness. And the planer is going to remove all of the bandsaw marks. After the planer, I'll joint one edge square, then I will take it over to the table saw and I will cut out the width for my tray walls. So when I build things like trays for boxes, I usually don't use a tape measure. I usually just hold the piece of wood right up to where I'm cutting it and make a quick mark. And this will allow me to get a really tight fit. Sometimes I'll cut it even just a little bit wider than what's necessary and just take micro cuts after that, adjusting it down until I get the fit exactly what I'm looking for. And this right here is just exactly the fit that I was trying to achieve. Once the box is all done and complete, what I could do is shrink it down by sanding the exterior. So here I'm going to mark the inner piece where it needs to go. Rather than put one piece of wood, the vertical walls on each side, I'll just shove both over to one side. And then I'll put this piece in the way, and then I can trace where this piece goes. And this gives me the actual length of the piece, without me having to split it between those 2 pieces of wood that go on the outside. I hope that makes sense there. But that's my mark. I'm going to transfer that so I can see it at the top, and then I will cut that also on the chop saw. And here I'm just going to do a little test fit and make sure that ended up cutting exactly how I wanted it to cut. And once I'm satisfied with that fit, then I'm going to go ahead and put it together. And you might notice here also that I cheated. I actually cut these walls down again off camera because I thought the walls or the tray were too high. I was going to do a single tray, and then we changed it up and we're going to do 2 trays now instead of 1. So I ended up making them shorter than what they were before. But here's how we're going to do the assembly, just like this. I'm using the square to make sure that this board lines up, the wall of the board lines up exactly flush with the bottom of the tray on the left-hand side there. And we're going to check here to make sure that it's square with the tray bottom, and that did end up being square, so that works out. Then we're basically just going to repeat that process for the other side. And I wanted to mention, if anybody's interested, this project actually came from our community. We have a community on Facebook called King's Fine Woodworking Community, and I will put a link to that in the description below if you are interested in joining the community. I basically take project ideas, or this is built for a community member, but we take project ideas. It's also a place where you can share your work. You can get help if you need help. You post a question. It's a closed group, and we vet everybody coming in. You have to answer a couple questions. We make sure that you're a woodworker. And it's basically woodworkers helping woodworkers. There are woodworkers of every level in there, from beginner who have never done any woodworking before to advanced master level woodworkers, even woodworkers far better than I am. And everybody just kind of helps everybody out, and it's a really nice community. So if you're interested in joining that, you are more than welcome. And I'll put a link to the description, or a link to that in the description below. I'd also like to take a moment to thank everybody who uses the links in the descriptions below our videos to buy the materials that they need for their projects, whether it's supplies or tools or things like that. All of those links, they're Amazon affiliate links, and they are actually the best prices around. But the main thing is if you use those links, then Amazon gives our channel a small commission on all of those sales, and that really does a lot to help us keep our channel going. So I just want to say thank you to everybody that does that, and I'd like to give a big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters who help us out. And we do a lot of videos, also a lot of requests from our Patreon members, whatever they would like to see done. That's typically some of our top priority stuff. But I'd just like to say thanks to everybody for helping us out. Okay, so this tray is coming together, and you probably noticed that the CA glue is just a little bit tedious to work with. It's sticky. You have to be very fast in positioning little pieces together because it does set very quick. But the nice thing is once everything's in place and it does set, you can just immediately move to your next step because it's fully cured and it's very fast. A project like this can be built in just a couple of days as opposed to 4 or 5 days of waiting for glue to dry overnight. And of course, it's back to the trusty disc sander to sand all of the outside edges perfectly flush and flush with the bottom, and get rid of all of the glue that has spilled out on those sides. Incidentally, I would also use the disc sander once this is all said and done if the tray didn't fit nicely inside of the box. And I would take it back to the disc sander and I would sand the outside of the tray all the way around, down just a tiny bit, and then recheck the fit in the box, and I might go back and forth a few times until I get exactly the fit that I'm looking for. And here I'm just going to create a little sanding stick to help me get inside of all those corners and sand off all of that extra CA glue. I just used this 3M Super 77 adhesive and wrap that around a stick, and that gives me a nice little sanding block. And then the fun begins. With the coarse sanding done, we'll stop and do a quick fit and make sure that everything is fitting well. And it looks like it does fit good. So we'll actually continue sanding. We'll get the corners cleaned up just a little bit more, and we will take this down to about 240 grit, and then we're going to apply the finish. For the finish for our project, we decided to go with a clear semi-gloss lacquer. And the Wenge actually takes quite a few coats because the wood is so porous. In some areas it soaks in a whole lot, other areas it doesn't soak in as much, so probably 5 or 6 coats total with a very light sanding between each coat. And the Padauk was actually considerably easier to finish, even though it's porous as well. But it didn't take quite as many coats to finish that. And before I forget, I want to give a shout out to my friend JP Brown from Foxhall Woodworks for helping me put this video together. I was in a little bit of a time crunch, and he is a very valuable person on our team. He helps with a lot of things that we need to have done. I'll put a link to his channel in the description below if you guys want to go check him out. And that's all there is to this project. Thanks for watching.